Good morning, everybody, and happy Halloween. This is Paul Cole from Profit Bandit, and today I'm here to present to you about repricing for Amazon sellers. We're calling today's webinar Repricing 101 because we're going to be talking about the very basics, answering some of the simplest questions that you guys have about repricing, and hopefully getting people excited about repricing their Amazon inventory. Before we even get started, Rick has got a question for me that I'm going to take a look at. Rick says, I often see prices in the thousands of dollars on books on Amazon. Is this due to a repricing system run amok? And the answer to that, Rick, like a lot of questions when it comes to selling on Amazon, is maybe. I can think of one other reason why someone might price a book in the thousands of dollars. Actually, I'll do this as a little giveaway. Can anybody out there think of a reason why a book could be priced for thousands of dollars on Amazon? Post your answer as a question, and if you get it right, I will give someone a free month of Profit Bandit. And the first person with the answer I was thinking of was Tim Carroll. He and Michael Wilson actually got the answer in at the same time. The reason is on vacation. Some sellers, when they are not available to fulfill items, or if they want to use the item as or they're just using it as a placeholder, they'll set the price way too high so nobody actually buys it. So Tim Carroll and Michael Wilson, send me an email to support@profitbanditapp.com after this, and I'll set you up with a free month of Profit Bandit. Lisa has also got a really great answer, and she's saying that it's a rare book, and that's true. There are definitely books out there that go for the thousands of dollars, but I was thinking more of reasons beyond the intrinsic value of the book. But to go back to the original question, yes, if you see a price of a book for $1,000, it's possible that that person's repricing system did not have a ceiling price, and the prices just kept competing with each other. I think last year I wrote a blog post about about repricing, where I talked about a famous incident with a book about it was a scientific textbook about fruit flies that ended up being listed for over $2 million because two repricing systems went back and forth and just kept raising the price for each other. So I'm going to get started with today's webinar now that we've kind of answered a few of your questions. And this is very simply, what is repricing? It's just changing your selling price. That's it. When we talk about repricing on Amazon, at its very basic level, we're talking about changing your price. That's it. Just changing your price. And now I'm going to answer a few questions about why you should reprice. The three main reasons that I think Amazon sellers should reprice are to maximize the value of each sale, to make sales that otherwise you'd miss out on, and three, to sell inventory that isn't moving. Those three things alone make repricing very valuable. And let me talk a little bit about each one. When I'm talking about maximizing the value of each sale, let's imagine you sell a book for $5. Could you have sold that same book for $5.50 to the same person? Could you have sold it for $6 to the same person? And the answer to that is, unless you experiment with repricing, you'll never know. And some of the automated tools that sellers use help you do that. And we're going to talk a small bit about that today, later on. And what do I mean by making sales that you'd otherwise miss out on? When I say this, I mean, imagine a seller undercuts you and snags a sale that otherwise you would have gotten, or somehow someone else gets into the buy box and steals the sale from you. Lots of sellers are willing to wait and to pick up sales at their desired price, but in a lot of cases it can be more profitable to quickly turn items over and to make those sales that you're missing out on for a longer term profit. And finally, this is one that's overlooked. Sell inventory that isn't moving. If you've got money invested in inventory and it's not selling, that's a loss. Anything that you can get out of it is going to cut that loss and give you some more cash flow to work with. And selling at a loss can even save you money. And any FBA seller who has been hit with a huge FBA long-term storage fee knows how expensive inventory sitting in an Amazon warehouse can be. So repricing can definitely help you just to move that inventory that isn't selling, cut your losses when necessary, and make some money, get some more cash to invest in better inventory. And now let's talk about the things that I haven't talked about really. These are the words that people always bring up when I start talking about repricing. They want to know if it's just about undercutting. They want to know what about the competition. They want to know about racing to the bottom. They want to know about penny books, and they want to know about losing money on each sale because they're selling for too low. And those aren't necessarily parts of repricing. Those can be parts of bad repricing, especially selling for too low or racing to the bottom. Out of control repricing is what leads to those two things. Because you need limits. You need to know when to stop repricing. And that's also something we're going to talk about today. And penny books are a whole other animal. There are many reasons to sell penny books that a lot of people aren't familiar with. A big one is that a lot of penny book sellers have huge operations where they make a very, very small amount on the shipping credit that Amazon provides for those penny books. Another reason is that some sellers will sell a ton of penny books at a loss or at a break even just so they can get positive feedbacks from those items to prop up their statistics in case they get bad feedbacks on other items that they sell. And many sellers won't believe this, but you can actually reprice without ever undercutting a competitor or without even taking the competition into consideration, although I don't recommend that. You can set your price to only match the other sellers. You can always be raising your prices, but you don't have to always be undercutting. And in some cases, you never have to be undercutting at all. And you can look at other factors when it comes to repricing other than the competition. For example, a great one is sales rank. If you notice your items having a really good sales rank, reprice based on that. Increase your prices when the sales rank is getting better. Lower your prices a little bit as the sales rank is dropping. And I just want everybody to understand that repricing isn't necessarily these four-letter words, so to speak, that we see here. It's not about undercutting. It's not about getting into races to the bottom. It's definitely not about losing money on your sales. And it's not the reason that penny books exist. This is also a question I get asked all of the time. Lots of sellers will ask me, who needs to be repricing? And when we talk about repricing being just changing your price on Amazon, pretty much all of you, I bet, reprice already, and you may not even realize it. Unless you're a seller who just picks a price for all of your items when you list them and never change it, you already are repricing. So I think that repricing is for every Amazon seller. It's a great way to maximize profits, a great way to make sales that you're missing out on, and a great way to move slow-moving inventory. And I know that's a short answer, but that's why we're now going to talk about the 4 types of repricing. And these are ones that we've identified that people do through our experience helping Amazon sellers. There's manual repricing, there's rule-based repricing, there's algorithmic repricing, and there's what we call intelligent real-time repricing. Manual pricing is what a lot of smaller sellers do. Manual repricing is when you or one of your employees logs on to Seller Central and changes your prices by hand. Does anybody out there who's listening now, is this the only way anybody reprices? Is anybody out there only repricing manually? And you can see by my next bullet that I'm not a big fan of manual repricing. It's slow, and it's inefficient, and it's error-prone. A simple typo can cost you a lot of money when manual repricing. It definitely doesn't scale unless you only have a few dozen or a few hundred items, or even a few hundred items in your inventory. It can be very difficult to reprice well doing it manually. So I like to see sellers move away from manual repricing and into some kind of automated repricing system, because one of the big bottlenecks for sellers is time. And time that's not spent repricing is time that you can spend on other parts of your business. And Many repricing systems are based on rules. Rule-based repricing is repricing that's based on rules like, if this, then I want to do this. For example, let's say on a certain item, I want to be a penny below the lowest price. And that's a simple rule. And that can work for a lot of sellers, but it also really depends on your inventory size. If you have to have a repricing system, check 5,000 or 10,000 or even more. We work with sellers who have hundreds of thousands of items in their inventory. As your inventory grows beyond a few hundred or a few thousand, rule-based repricing can be a little slow. It depends on your inventory speed. And the worst part is if you make a mistake with your rules, you can run into trouble, especially with software that doesn't have good limits in place. And we're going to talk a little bit about limits in a little bit. Algorithmic repricing is something newer. It's something that's just come on in the past couple of years. And that's kind of set it and forget it. Remember the Ron Popeil rotisserie ads. Basically what you're doing is handing over a lot of control to the repricing software and letting it make the best decision for your price based on the data available to it. And some sellers like that. It's not something we do here at SellerEngine and Profit Bandit. We prefer to kind of go to the next level, and that's something we call intelligent real-time repricing. That's something our software Celery does. And we're going to go through a few of the things Celery can do real quick. Celery has what we call smart lists that let you choose the inventory you want to reprice. Celery does have customizable rules that will let you set prices and compete for the buy box. But unlike a lot of repricing programs, Celery has what we call a dynamic minimum price. That means you input your cost, and Celery calculates your Amazon fees and your shipping costs and everything else, kind of like how Profit Bandit does, to keep you from selling your item from too low of a price. And the real killer feature of Celery is real-time repricing that keeps you out front of the competition. Real-time repricing is based on notifications. When one of your competitors sells out of stock, Celery is notified and can adjust your price based on that. If another seller starts selling the same item as you, we receive a notification and can immediately respond to the pricing changes on Amazon. It's not like older repricers who are simply repricing all of your inventory every hour. As prices change in real time, Celery can react and reprice based on that. So instead of waiting an hour for all of your items to be repriced, you're getting immediate feedback and can immediately change your prices on Amazon automatically. And smart lists are really cool, and I'll talk about them real quick. Smart lists are dynamic, which means that as your items change, they can move in and out of different smart lists. So let's look at this example. One thing you can do with this is to say, I want all of my items priced, all of my items that have been in an FBA warehouse for more than 90 days priced a certain way. And if after say 180 days, you can price them a different way. So as items age, as items stay in an FBA warehouse longer, they can be repriced different ways automatically. And that's pretty cool. And you don't have to do anything. This is an example of Celery's minimum price calculation. We start by looking at your cost. Then we add any markup that you want to add. We attempt to calculate FBA inbound shipping. We estimate your FBA fees. We estimate the variable closing fee. And we add in the Amazon commission to come up with a minimum price that our repricer doesn't let you sell below. And that's something that a lot of repricing programs lack. And that's what leads to those races to the bottom and just that constant undercutting that ends up with items being sold for what you think is way too low. With Celery, you would get out of the repricing contest when you hit this minimum price, and that's what keeps you from selling at a loss. And now we're going to talk just a little bit about the very basics of getting started with even manual repricing. Let's talk about setting your initial price. Does anybody want to talk, or does anybody want to post a question about how they pick their initial minimum price? Just like automated systems do, if you're manually repricing, you need to consider cost, Amazon fees, fulfillment costs, whatever you're charging for your time, all of those factors. One old rule of thumb that I hear people using a lot is saying that 1/3 of the selling price should be how much you pay for your item, 1/3 should go to Amazon for their fees, and 1/3 should be profit for you. And this is just a rule of thumb, but it works for some businesses, so kind of think about that. So if you're buying an item for $10, a lot of sellers will recommend selling it for $30. But of course, that depends on how fast you can turn it over and other things like that. But basically, you need to come up with a good method for picking your initial price. Like, what are you going to sell this item for on Amazon? And then after that, you need to think about when you're going to be repricing. To people here who said that they reprice manually, do you do it every day or once an hour, or what's your schedule? You need to get on a schedule and stick with it, because otherwise you're not going to be able to see the results of your experiments. And then look at how to reprice. Here are the 4 things that I would say you need to do to reprice effectively. Consider the competition. Is Amazon selling the item as well? Look at who has the buy box. Can you be competitive on price with the buy box, with the current buy box offer? If so, then you have a very good chance of getting into the buy box rotation. And that's a great place to be for, as you all know. And then also use Amazon's business reports. Does anybody here use Amazon's business report? Does anybody here use the buy box percentage or the unit session percentage? Those are 2 great metrics that can tell you whether your prices are in the ballpark. I blogged a little bit about this at sellerengine.com/blog. And when I send out the video of this, I'll include a couple links to those blog posts so you guys can read about those Amazon business metrics. And here's the bottom line. No matter if you're repricing manually, if you're repricing using software, no matter how you're repricing, you need to know, is your repricing effective? Are you selling more? Is your average sales price increasing? Are you actually making money? And those are the questions we want to see you answer yes to. And if your repricing is not effective, you should stop doing it and try something else. If you're finding that you're not actually increasing the amount you're bringing in over the long term, try a different repricing strategy. And for those of you who are running a growing business and who are looking into using repricing software, here are my tips. The biggest one: before you allow any repricing software to manage your prices on Amazon, understand how that software works. Here at SellerEngine, for both SellerEngine Plus and Celery, we offer phone support. In fact, we love talking to you guys on the phone because it lets us show you how our software works, and it lets us make sure that you understand how the software is going to interact with your Amazon inventory and how it's going to be changing your prices. And this is just my opinion, but if I was an Amazon seller looking at software and I couldn't talk to someone on the telephone, I'd be looking for a new repricing software, because I'd need to feel comfortable that that software was going to do what I wanted it to do. And in our experience here at SellerEngine, the best way to do that is one-on-one over the telephone, sharing screens, or just talking to someone. Email's great too, but personally, I like telephone support. The third key to success with Amazon repricing software is to make sure you have floor and ceiling prices set. Floor prices, like Celery's dynamic minimum price, make sure that you don't sell an item for too low, and make sure you don't lose money on your sales. And ceiling prices are just as important, because while you may not realize it, if you keep climbing, you're never going to make that sale, like those thousands of dollar books that we mentioned earlier, or the $1 million textbook that I saw. It's kind of funny, and you won't lose money, but you also won't make any sales if your repricing software just keeps on climbing your prices. So having floor and ceiling prices are equally important. The next big key to success is to start slowly. And by that I mean focus on a subset of your inventory. Work on repricing a few of your items to start until you get the hang of what works for you and what works for your business. And also be willing to experiment. Don't be afraid to lower prices in an attempt to, even if it means losing a little bit of profit on each sale, if it lets you turn the items over faster and make it up in volume. And also don't be afraid to raise your prices. For every sale that you make, remember, if it was possible to get another nickel or dollar out of that sale, that's just money you're leaving on the table. So be open to experimentation when you're selling on Amazon and using Amazon repricing software. And I was hoping to get a lot of questions from people. I only got 3 that I've got them an answer today. So I hope while I'm working through these, you guys think of some more questions. And we'll ask them at the end of this when I finish answering these questions. The first question, what is the best way to reprice without starting a race to the bottom? And like we've been talking about, 1, have a floor price and stick to it. Don't keep competing. A second really great tip that I've found works really, really well is to experiment with raising your prices during certain times of the day or in certain circumstances. And I wrote a blog post about this too that I'll send to all of you. And if you can find the right time of day when your competitors aren't doing their repricing, you can kind of inch that price back up over time, lower it when you have to, inch it back up, lower it a little bit. Over time, you can actually raise the overall selling prices of your items by doing this. And third, the best way to reprice without starting a race to the bottom is don't start a race to the bottom. Instead of undercutting, match or set prices above the competition. Basically, in these cases, you're hoping that you'll get into the buy box rotation. Hopefully, your seller metrics, like your Amazon order defect rate, your customer service rankings are really good. And if you do that, if that's the case, then matching or setting prices above the competition can get you into the buy box without undercutting. So whoever asked this question, if you're here today, I hope this answers it. We're going to move on to question 2 here. And this person asks, I have complete control over my pricing, setting it just right, just setting it in just the right slot based on how many FBA offers there are, condition, and rank. Will I have that same degree of control with pricing software? Here's the answer I'm going to give that you may not like. Ask yourself how you know that you have the price just right. If you haven't experimented with your pricing, how do you know it's just right? And think of repricing as a solution that makes you money in the long term, even if you believe that prices aren't just right at any given moment. By raising and lowering your prices over time, hopefully by collecting all this data and analyzing the results of repricing, your system will be able to hone in on the true right price rather than one that's just been built up over time through your intuition. There's nothing wrong with believing you're in the right price right now, but I would really encourage you to have an open mind and consider raising and lowering your prices to see if your long-term profit grows. I bet that it does. But to answer your question, in general, yes. With most repricing software, you will be able to set prices for specific SKUs, although we don't always recommend that approach. Doing that is kind of like having automated repricing software do your manual repricing for you. It's a lot faster than you doing it on your own. But if you're just telling it to set a certain price for your items, you're really not taking advantage of the power of repricing software, which is the ability to react to changes in the marketplace and work and reprice in real time rather than just working off of your own settings. And I hope that answers that person's question. And finally, this is a really good question. Do I need to set up the price for each item individually, or can I set my overall price by return on investment for all my items? And like I said before, you can set prices for an individual item, but Celery especially makes setting prices as a group easy. The first way we make sure of this is making sure that all your items have an accurate cost. So when you import your inventory into Celery, you need to tell us how much you paid for it. That's part of how we calculate the minimum price. Next, you need to create a smart list of all the items you want to reprice. And then your pricing rule will be to set a percentage above your cost or minimum price for your return on investment. And that's how you would price by ROI using Celery. And now we've got plenty of time for questions from you guys. So who's got hard questions about repricing that you'd like me to answer? Alan Drake just says selling on other channels. I'm not sure what his question is, but if you want to clarify that, I'd love to talk some more about how to sell on other international channels using repricing software. Does anybody else have any other repricing questions for me today? I'll give you a few minutes to decide. Oh. Are there plans to make Celery available for eBay sellers? DG asks me this, and DG, the answer is we are working on adding some eBay features to Celery, but right now our focus is on Amazon repricing. Renee asks, is there a way to include your processing costs into the minimum price in Celery? And the answer is yes. There's two ways to do this. One, you could build your processing costs into the costs of the item that you upload to Celery. For example, let's say you buy a book for $10 and your processing costs are $2. You could upload $12 as your cost to Celery, or you could add that processing cost into the shipping costs for that item, as it's used to calculate the minimum price. But if your processing costs are relatively fixed, I'd recommend adding them onto the cost of the item that you add into Celery. Matthew Ferreira asks, do repricers have reporting features? It depends on the repricer, but Celery has what we call exports. And that lets you export the results of your repricing, lets you export data about the competition for all your items. You can export a heck of a lot of stuff from Celery, and you can even have it done on a schedule. You can even have it done on a schedule so you get these reports delivered to your inbox every day or whenever you want. Taylor asks, what strategies are built into Celery pertaining to the price of my product rising once a competitor's product runs out? For example, if I hit my floor competing with another seller and they run out, what type of strategy raises it back up when they run out? It's a great question, and you're almost answering it yourself. When you work with our Celery repricing experts, you would ask a question like that, and they would say, here's how we create the smart list and the pricing rule to do this. We do have some built-in strategies into Celery, none that do this specific thing, but it's a really easy strategy to create. Basically what you would do is say, when my competitors run out of stock, I want to start raising my prices until the competitors no longer run out of stock. This would be really simple to set up with in a strategy session with one of our repricing experts. Matthew asks, how many times... in terms of how many items are repriced, I don't think we have reporting for how often an item's been repriced or how many times it's been repriced. But I'll check on that and give you an answer for sure in the email I send out to you guys with a recording of this. David Lavers asks a really important question. How much do repricers cost? And they're all over the place. You might be able to find a cheap repricer for as little as $10 a month. Some of the bigger repricers for enterprise sellers, really big businesses, can cost $10,000 or $15,000 a month, depending on what software you're using. Our software Celery costs $100 a month or 1% of your monthly sales, whichever is greater. So if you're selling less than $10,000 per month, Celery will cost you a flat $100 per month. If you're selling more than $10,000 per month, Celery costs you 1% of your monthly sales. Michael Wilson asks, I have over 2,000 books in FBA. Am I going to have to tell Celery how much I paid for each one? And the answer is, we would love it if you had a spreadsheet that told you how much you paid for these books. If you don't, that's okay. Celery can automatically guess at your item's cost. Our default is to say, we're going to assume that you paid about 45, or I think it's 50% of the item's cost, or item's current selling price when we import it into your account is cost. So if you're selling your book for $10, we'll assume that your cost is $5. And we'd love for you to update that with the true cost. It's a great way to get the most out of Celery because your cost and minimum price are going to be even more accurate. But we will take our best guess at your cost if you don't know what it is. I'm not seeing a lot of more questions coming in here. So one thing I wanted to ask about is, I know that November is going to be a really busy time for all of you guys out there sourcing and scanning and scouting. And I want to know if there's any topics that I could talk about for a webinar that would be beneficial for you during that busy time. I know a lot of you probably won't attend, but be thinking about what you'd like me to talk about in November as far as succeeding during this really busy time of year. I was thinking about talking about customer service tips, ways to maximize your metrics during the fourth quarter. But I'll send an email out about this if you guys don't have any ideas right now. Renee had a good suggestion to talk about price trends during November and December. And that's something I may touch on during our next webinar. But unless anybody has any more repricing questions, I think that'll do it for today. I'll give you guys another minute or two. Matthew Ferreira asks, if I had questions in the future, who should I contact? Send us an email to, if you have questions about repricing, send us an email to support@sellerengine.com. That's SUPPORT @seller, SELLER, engine, ENGINE.com. And we'd love to help you out and get you started using one of our repricing software. Celery has a free 2-week trial, and we'd love to show it to you. And I just want to thank everybody for taking some time out of their Halloween today to listen to me talk about repricing. And thank you all very much for being members of the Profit Bandit community. And send me an email, support@profitbanditapp.com, if you ever need anything else.